We begin in a world before the internet existed, yet somehow filled with the same patterns of misinformation and viral rumors we associate with modern times. What most people don't realize is that long before Facebook posts, long before YouTube videos, and long before smartphones, the foundations of today's internet hoaxes were already in place. They simply traveled through different tools, different technologies, and different fears. The 1980s were a decade of transformation. Personal computers were appearing in homes for the first time, fax machines were becoming common in offices, and the world was beginning to understand how fast information could travel when technology removed barriers. But with every new form of communication came a new opportunity for misinformation to spread. The 1980s are often remembered for pop culture, big hair, neon colors, and the rise of home video games, but beneath the surface, there was something else happening. Rumors, myths, and fabricated stories spread from person to person with surprising speed. These hoaxes were not digital in the way we think of them today, but they behaved exactly like modern internet rumors. Someone would say something that sounded authoritative, it would get passed along, and before long, millions of people were repeating it as fact. The only difference was the delivery system. One of the most famous hoaxes of the decade did not begin on a computer at all. It began with a simple request that accidentally became one of the largest chain letter events in world history. In 1989, a young British boy named Craig Shergold was diagnosed with a brain tumor. His family hoped to break a world record by receiving the most get well cards. A well meaning charity helped promote the effort, but something unexpected happened. The story escaped its original purpose and transformed into a self replicating rumor. Chain letters containing Craig's name circulated across the world. People photocopied the letter at work, mailed it to friends, and encouraged others to send cards too. It spread so widely that by the early 1990s, Craig had received millions of cards. Even after he recovered, the chain letter continued without context, without updates, and without stopping. Versions appeared under different names, different ages, and different illnesses. It became one of the first hoaxes to jump from the physical mail system directly into early online communication. Once email became popular, it proved something important. A well-crafted story could survive any medium and ignore the truth completely. While chain letters traveled through postal mail, fax machines were becoming the newest technology in the business world. And as soon as fax machines became common, hoaxes followed them. Offices received false warnings that government agencies were preparing to regulate fax transmissions or impose heavy per-page fees. Rumors circulated that long-distance charges were secretly being added to fax calls even when they stayed within the same city. These warnings were usually written in serious business language, making them appear legitimate. Workers would copy the fax and distribute it to other departments, believing they were helping colleagues avoid upcoming costs. These fax hoaxes created the exact same environment we see today online. People trusted anything that looked official. Computer culture was also taking its first major steps forward in the 1980s. Home machines like the Commodore 64, Apple II, and early IBM PCs were beginning to appear in households. For the first time, people who had never interacted with computers were suddenly responsible for maintaining them. This created the perfect environment for technology-based rumors. Some of the earliest computer hoaxes were warnings about imaginary viruses. Rumors claimed that inserting a certain floppy disk into a computer could physically damage the hardware. Other stories insisted that hidden code inside free programs could cause a monitor to explode or permanently melt the internal parts. None of these claims were factual, but they were believable to people unfamiliar with computers. As technology advanced, myths followed close behind. Another major category of pre-internet hoaxes grew out of the decade's moral panics. The 1980s were filled with cultural fears about hidden messages, secret symbols, and unseen dangers. Rumors spread that major corporations were aligned with occult groups. The Procter and Gamble satanic logo hoax became one of the largest corporate misinformation campaigns of its time. The company's long-standing moon and stars logo was falsely claimed to represent demonic symbolism, and church groups across the country distributed pamphlets and warnings. Although the rumor had no evidence behind it, it spread quickly due to fear, distrust of corporations, and the ease with which people repeated dramatic stories. Years later, when the internet became mainstream, this exact hoax resurfaced as one of the earliest email chain rumors. The online form was simply a digital version of what churches had already mailed out in the 1980s. Early bulletin board systems, known as BBS networks, also began circulating technological myths during the decade. These were small, dial-up communities where users could exchange messages, files, and software. Although primitive compared to the modern internet, they created the first spaces where digital rumors spread among strangers. Users would upload stories about new virus threats, secret commands that unlocked hidden features, or software that could damage your computer if opened on the wrong day. Even when these claims were false, they traveled quickly because no one had experience verifying digital information. Looking back at the 1980s, something becomes clear. Hoaxes thrive when three conditions exist. First, the technology is new and poorly understood. Second, information can be shared quickly from person to person. Third, there is fear or excitement strong enough to override skepticism. The 1980s had all three. Whether it was chain letters filling mailboxes, fax machines sending alarming memos, or computer rumors spreading across bulletin boards, the decade laid the foundation for everything that was coming next. As the 1980s came to an end, personal computers were becoming more capable, communication tools were improving, and a new technology was emerging that would change the world forever. This technology would take hoaxes that once took weeks to spread and deliver them globally in a single day. The earliest version of this system was already quietly operating in universities, military networks, and research institutions. It was called the Internet. And as the 1990s began, hoaxes were about to evolve into something far more powerful than anyone expected. The arrival of the 1990s brought a dramatic shift in the way rumors spread. The structures that would eventually become the modern internet were now opening to the public, and ordinary people were experiencing digital communication for the first time. While the internet still looked nothing like the social networks and platforms we know today, its earliest form created the perfect environment for hoaxes to multiply at a speed no one had ever seen before. For the first time in history, a message could travel across continents in a matter of seconds. And with this new power came the next evolution in misinformation. In the early 1990s, many users accessed the online world through services like America Online, CompuServe, and Prodigy. These networks offered basic email, message boards, and chat rooms. To a modern audience, the technology seemed simple, but at the time it felt revolutionary. People who had never touched a computer in the 1980s suddenly found themselves sending electronic messages to friends and strangers. The excitement was real, the curiosity was real, and so was a sense of vulnerability. Most people did not understand how email worked, what viruses were, or how messages traveled from one machine to another. This lack of understanding created a fertile environment for digital hoaxes to flourish. One of the earliest and most influential hoaxes of the 1990s was the Good Times virus hoax. It began circulating in 1994 and quickly became one of the most widespread digital rumors of the decade. The warning claimed that a computer virus called Good Times could destroy your hard drive simply by opening an email with a specific subject line. The message insisted that no action was needed. You did not need to download an attachment or click anything. The email itself would instantly corrupt your system. Although this was technologically impossible at the time, the rumor spread like wildfire. People forwarded the warning to protect friends, not realizing they were doing the exact thing the hoax depended on. The Good Times virus hoax was an early demonstration of how fear could override logic when navigating unfamiliar technology. It also revealed something important. In the digital world, hoaxes did not require malicious software to cause damage. The fear was enough. Around the same time, rumors about government taxation of electronic messages began circulating. These warnings claimed that Congress or the Federal Communications Commission planned to impose fees on email. The idea was that since postal services charged for physical mail, the government would soon begin charging for digital mail as well. Some versions of the hoax insisted the plan had already been approved. Others encouraged users to forward the warning in order to stop the tax from taking effect. These messages often contained official-sounding language, references to non-existent bills, and instructions on how users could protest by forwarding the message. As with many hoaxes, the lack of understanding about how digital communication worked allowed the rumor to spread without resistance. People feared losing access to a new form of communication they had only recently discovered. Virus hoaxes also continued to grow. Some warned of invisible threats that could destroy a computer when certain files were opened. Others claimed that a new virus spread only through reading a message in an online chat room. A few versions even stated that viruses could be transmitted through images or text files, something that was not technologically possible during that era. But these warnings succeeded because no one knew what to believe. The concept of a computer virus was still unfamiliar to most people, and the idea of a digital threat that could spread silently through harmless actions created a powerful emotional response. This period also saw the rise of chain emails. These were descendants of the chain letters from the 1980s, but delivered instantly through digital communication. Many chain emails promised blessings or good fortune if the message was forwarded to a certain number of people. Others threatened misfortune if the recipient refused to participate. Some claimed that the email was being monitored and counted by a large corporation, usually Microsoft, as part of a special promotional experiment. The idea that a billionaire like Bill Gates would pay users for forwarding messages was so widespread that it became one of the most enduring myths of the decade. The message evolved in hundreds of variations, all claiming that Microsoft was tracking forwards and rewarding participants. Even though the claim had no basis in reality, the hoax spread for years because it offered something people wanted: the possibility of easy money. Another major influence of the early to mid 1990s was the Y2K fear. Although the Y2K problem was a real technological concern, exaggerated rumors spread far beyond the actual risk. Some versions claimed that all computers would fail at midnight and that society would collapse. Others went further, predicting airline crashes, bank failures, and military defense system errors. While Y2K was not a hoax in the traditional sense, it fueled countless hoax-related rumors. Scammers sold fake Y2K survival software, fraudulent guides, and fake emergency checklists. Misinformation spread quickly through email as people shared warnings to friends and family. The event demonstrated once again how fear could amplify even small inaccuracies into massive waves of panic. As the 1990s continued, more households gained access to personal computers and more people ventured online. Chat rooms grew in popularity. Early online communities formed around shared interests. With this new level of connectivity, rumors began to gain speed and reach. A false claim could now spread from one side of the country to the other in a single evening. What had once been limited to a handful of people in a workplace or local group could now be seen by thousands. The hoax environment of the 1980s had expanded dramatically. This decade also saw the early appearance of urban legends adapted into digital form. Stories about criminals hiding under cars, kidnappers posing as helpful strangers, or new drug threats entering schools were retold through email. These stories were often presented as first-hand accounts, even though they originated from old urban legends that had been circulating for decades offline. The only difference was the delivery method. Email made these legends feel more urgent and personal. It also allowed them to spread with renewed strength. By the late 1990s, digital misinformation had become a natural part of online communication. Many users expected to encounter virus warnings, chain letters, and urban legends as part of their internet experience. The culture of forwarding messages without verification was firmly established. People believed they were helping others when they spread these warnings. In reality, they were unintentionally giving power to false information. As the decade drew to a close, the online world was preparing for another transformation. Faster internet connections were becoming more affordable. Home computers were more powerful. New platforms for communication were appearing, including instant messaging programs and early forms of social interaction on the web. With these advancements came the next stage in the evolution of hoaxes. The era of the simple chain email was ending. The era of large-scale social hoaxes was about to begin. As the 1990s came to an end, the internet was beginning to expand into something larger and more socially connected. Home computers were becoming common, more families now had dial-up access, and teenagers in particular were spending increasing amounts of time online. Instant messaging services like AOL Instant Messenger and MSN Messenger were exploding in popularity, bringing fast paced communication into everyday life. With these new tools came new opportunities for misinformation to spread. The hoaxes of the early internet were largely built on fear and warnings, but the next stage would introduce social pressure, emotional manipulation, and online identity hoaxes. The internet was no longer just a communication tool, it was becoming a community, and communities are fertile ground for rumors. Email was still the primary way people shared information, but the culture surrounding it had changed. The old style of hoaxes had laid a foundation, and new messages began building on it. Chain emails evolved into emotional appeals, tragic stories, missing person alerts, and charity requests. Many of these messages were based on real stories that were outdated or distorted beyond recognition. Others were completely fabricated. The structure remained the same. The message urged readers to forward it to as many people as possible. Some versions claimed that a child would receive medical funding only if the message reached a certain number of people. Others insisted that a missing child would be found sooner if the email was widely shared. These messages were often impossible to verify, yet they spread rapidly because they appealed to compassion rather than fear. People forwarded them because they wanted to help. Another major trend of the late 1990s and early 2000s was the rise of fake warnings about personal safety. These hoaxes often targeted parents and young internet users. Stories circulated about gang initiation rituals, dangerous new drugs disguised as candy, and criminals using strange methods to trick victims. Some versions warned that flashing headlights at a car with its lights off was part of a deadly gang initiation. Others claimed that temporary tattoos for children contained hidden drugs or razor blades. None of these warnings were accurate, but they spread because they created anxiety and encouraged protective behavior. They also reflected the fear people had about a rapidly changing world where information moved too quickly to evaluate. The internet also began to see the rise of fake celebrity rumors. Before this period, rumors about celebrities spread mainly through magazines and television shows. But now, email allowed false stories to travel instantly. Claims about secret marriages, surprising scandals, or sudden deaths began circulating in the form of forwarded messages. Many of these rumors were harmless, but some had real world consequences. News outlets occasionally picked up these false stories and ran them without proper verification, unintentionally giving them legitimacy. For the first time, misinformation generated by ordinary people online was influencing mainstream news. This era also witnessed the early stages of phishing scams. In the late 1990s, scammers began sending emails that appeared to be from banks, online services, or government agencies. These messages asked users to verify account information or provide personal details. Although the practice was primitive compared to modern phishing attacks, it marked a turning point. People were now being targeted directly through digital deception. Phishing scams grew rapidly because users did not understand how to distinguish real emails from fake ones. The concept of account security was new, password recovery systems were basic, and the idea that someone could impersonate a business using nothing but text and a logo seemed both surprising and believable. During this time, the internet saw another shift in hoaxes. Some became interactive. Early online quizzes and surveys would encourage users to input personal details, share results with friends, or forward questions to their entire contact list. These activities were fun, but they helped normalize the idea of sharing large amounts of information without considering risks. In many ways, this trend laid the groundwork for the future of social media, where sharing personal information would become the default behavior. Around the same period, excitement about the future of the internet led to a wave of optimistic hoaxes. Messages claimed that tech billionaires were giving away money, offering free flights, or rewarding users who forwarded emails. Some hoaxes promised free computers or gift cards for participating in early internet experiments. These messages often included fake tracking numbers or references to well-known companies to increase their credibility. Although harmless on the surface, they contributed to an environment where people felt comfortable forwarding unverified claims. By the early 2000s, the volume of misinformation had grown dramatically. The internet was no longer a niche tool for hobbyists or professionals. It had become part of everyday life. People relied on it for communication, entertainment, and information. But the speed at which hoaxes traveled far outpaced the public's ability to verify them. Many families had only recently begun using the internet. Schools and workplaces were struggling to keep up with digital literacy. Even basic fact-checking was difficult due to the lack of reliable online resources. As a result, misinformation spread easily and shaped perceptions of new technology. The transition from the 1990s to the early 2000s can be described as the shift from simple digital hoaxes to socially driven digital hoaxes. The internet was becoming more interactive. People were beginning to form online identities and friendships. Communities were forming around shared interests. This new social environment magnified the impact of rumors. Instead of one person forwarding an email to a dozen friends, hundreds of people could now access the same message within minutes through online forums or group chats. As people grew more connected, hoaxes grew more powerful, and the world was about to enter a new phase. Platforms were emerging that would change digital communication forever. Email would soon lose its place as the main driver of online rumors. A new generation of websites was coming, websites that allowed people to create profiles, post publicly, and share information instantly. These platforms would take the hoaxes of the early internet and elevate them to a scale never before seen. The earliest forms of social networking were beginning to appear. Users were creating personal pages, uploading photos, and sharing messages with friends and strangers alike. What had once been a private communication tool was transforming into a public stage. And with that transformation, hoaxes would evolve from simple warnings and chain messages into complex, widespread misinformation with global reach. The next chapter in this story would belong to the rise of early social networks, communities, and platforms that set the stage for the modern era of internet hoaxes. Thank you for watching this story. If you enjoyed learning something new today, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment telling us what you thought of this story.